To our amazing viewers at Cheating Tales Lab, we'd love to hear, which part of the world are you joining us from? Let us know. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Weight of Command. Luke Clifford stood in the rain outside Fort Bragg's training facility, watching another batch of young soldiers struggle through the obstacle course. 20 years he'd been doing this, molding boys into warriors, teaching them to survive the unsurvivable. At 52, his hair had gone silver at the temples, but his eyes remained sharp, assessing every movement with the precision of a man who understood that the difference between life and death often came down to a single decision. Sergeant Clifford, a recruit, stumbled face first into the mud. The others kept running. Good. He'd taught them that. Luke checked his watch. 3 more hours, then he'd head home to Virginia. Home to Michelle, his wife of 28 years. Home to their daughter Sarah, who was finishing her nursing degree. And home to the memory of Preston, their eldest, who'd made choices that led him to Riverbend State Penitentiary 18 months ago. Preston, his boy. Luke's jaw tightened as he thought about their last conversation through the plexiglass partition. Preston had looked thinner, harder. Prison did that. But he'd been clean for 14 months, attending NA meetings, taking college courses. The parole board hearing was in 6 months. Dad, I know I messed up, Preston had said, his voice cracking. I know what I put you and Mom through, but I'm going to make it right. I'm going to make you proud. Luke had wanted to tell him he was already proud. Proud that Preston had survived addiction, that he'd found the strength to change. But the words had stuck in his throat, trapped by years of military discipline that taught him men didn't show weakness. Just keep your head down, Luke had said instead. Do your time. Come home. Now. As rain soaked through his uniform, Luke pulled out his phone. 2 missed calls from an unknown number. A voicemail. His finger hovered over the play button, some instinct making his pulse quicken. He pressed it. Mr. Clifford, this is Warden Wilson Hunt from Riverbend State Penitentiary. I need you to call me back immediately. It's about your son. The obstacle course faded away. The rain disappeared. Luke was dialing before his conscious mind caught up with his body's response. Mr. Clifford. The warden's voice was professionally neutral, but Luke heard the undertone. He'd heard it before, delivering death notifications to families. I need you to come to the prison. There's been an incident involving Preston. Is he hurt? Luke's voice came out steady, controlled. 20 years of command presence holding him together. Silence. Too long. Then, Mr. Clifford, I think this conversation needs to happen in person. Tell me now. Another pause. I'm sorry. Preston was killed yesterday evening in the common area. We're conducting a full investigation. The phone slipped from Luke's hand, clattering on the wet concrete. One of his sergeants looked over, concerned, but Luke waved him off. He bent down, retrieved the phone, his movements mechanical. Ow! The words scraped out of his throat. The investigation is ongoing, but it appears to have been an altercation with another inmate. Mr. Clifford, I understand this is. Luke ended the call. His hands weren't shaking. His breathing remained steady. But something inside him, something fundamental, had cracked. Not broken. Luke Clifford didn't break, but cracked, and through that crack, something cold and purposeful was seeping in. He walked to his office, closed the door, and sat at his desk. On the wall hung commendations, photos from 3 decades of service, certificates of completion for every advanced combat training the military offered. He taught thousands of soldiers how to kill efficiently, how to survive impossible odds, how to complete missions that others deemed suicide runs. And he'd taught them one other thing, how to plan. Luke opened his desk drawer and pulled out a notebook. He began writing with the same methodical precision he used to plan training exercises. Step 1, get to the prison. Step 2, get the truth. Step 3, his pen paused over the paper. Step 3 would depend on what he learned. The rain continued outside, but Luke didn't hear it anymore. He was already planning, already calculating, already becoming something other than the instructor who'd stood on that field 10 minutes ago. The military had spent decades teaching Luke Clifford how to think, how to adapt, how to execute. They'd created the perfect weapon. They just never considered what would happen if someone aimed it at the wrong target. Chapter 2. The Truth Bleeds Out. The drive to Riverbend took 4 hours. Michelle sat beside him in silence, her face pale, her hands clutching a tissue that had long since disintegrated into fragments. Sarah had stayed behind with her Aunt Sylvia, Michelle's sister. Some things daughters didn't need to see. Luke hadn't spoken since they left Fort Bragg. There was nothing to say. Words were for people who believed they could change reality. Luke dealt in actions now. The prison rose from the Virginia countryside like a concrete monument to human failure. Razor wire glinted in the afternoon sun. Guard towers stood at each corner, unmanned, budget cuts, probably. Luke noticed everything, cataloging details with the automatic assessment of someone trained to identify weaknesses in any defensive position. Warden Wilson Hunt met them in his office, a space that tried too hard to seem professional. Fake wood paneling, motivational posters about rehabilitation, a photo of Hunt shaking hands with the governor. Hunt himself was mid-50s, soft around the middle, with the tired eyes of a man drowning in bureaucracy. Mr. and Mrs. Clifford, please sit down. Hunt gestured to chairs that had seen better decades. I can't tell you how sorry I am for your loss. Tell me what happened. Luke's voice was flat, emotionless. Michelle gripped his hand, her nails digging into his palm. Hunt shuffled papers on his desk, not meeting their eyes. Preston was in the common area during recreation time. According to witnesses, another inmate, Tyrone Neal, approached him. There was an altercation. Neal had a shank, a homemade weapon. Preston was stabbed 4 times before guards could intervene. 4 times, Luke repeated. How long did it take the guards to intervene? Approximately 3 minutes from initial contact to 3 minutes. Luke leaned forward. Warren Hunt, I've trained combat response teams. 3 minutes is an eternity. Where are the guards? Hunt's face flushed. Mr. Clifford, I understand you're upset, but this is an active investigation. Who is Tyrone Neal? What was his motive? Why did he target my son? Neal claims Preston owed him money for protection. It's a common. My son didn't gamble, didn't use drugs anymore, and his commissary account shows no unusual withdrawals. Luke had already accessed Preston's prison records. Michelle had looked at him strangely when he'd mentioned it during the drive, but she hadn't questioned him. She knew her husband. Try again. Hunt stood up, defensive now. Mr. Clifford, I understand you're grieving, but I won't have you come into my prison and your prison. Luke stood too, and something in his posture made Hunt step back. 23 guards on duty when my son was murdered. 3 minutes to respond. Security cameras that somehow malfunctioned in that specific area at that specific time. Luke had read the preliminary report on Hunt's desk, upside down, while the warden talked. Speed reading was a useful skill. You want to try honesty this time? Michelle touched Luke's arm. Luke, the warden's phone rang. He answered it, listening, his face going pale. I understand. Send him in. The door opened, and a man in an expensive suit entered. He introduced himself as the prison's legal counsel, but Luke ignored him. He was looking at Hunt, watching the warden's body language, shoulders tensed, eyes darting, hands fidgeting with a pen. Fear. Hunt was afraid. Mr. and Mrs. Clifford, the lawyer said smoothly, the state understands this is a difficult time. We're prepared to offer a settlement. Get out, Luke said quietly. I'm sorry, both of you. Get out of this office for 5 minutes. I start making calls to people who will find it very interesting that a lawyer showed up within 24 hours of an inmate's death with a settlement offer. The lawyer looked at Hunt. The warden nodded, and they both left. Michelle started to stand, but Luke shook his head. You need to hear this. He sat back down, waiting. 20 years of interrogation experience had taught him that silence was a weapon. Guilty people couldn't stand it. 3 minutes later, the office phone rang. Luke answered it. Mr. Clifford? Hunt's voice came through speakerphone. He was calling from outside his own office. Please, you don't understand the situation. Then explain it. A long pause. There's an inmate here. Carlos Byers. Goes by Santos. He controls certain operations within the prison. Drugs, protection rackets, contraband. Preston was clean, wouldn't participate. Santos made an example of him. Michelle made a sound like someone had punched her in the stomach. And you let it happen, Luke said. I didn't. Hunt's voice cracked. You don't understand. Santos has connections outside. Real connections. Cartel money, political influence. 3 years ago, a guard tried to take him down. That guard's daughter was kidnapped, raped, and dumped in a river. Nobody could prove anything, but everybody knew. So yes, Mr. Clifford, I let things happen that I shouldn't. Because I have a family too. Luke's hand tightened on the phone. Where is Santos now? Protective custody. He's in lockdown. And Tyrone Neal, hospital wing. He got beaten pretty badly after it happened. Other inmates. Even in here, some lines shouldn't be crossed. Luke closed his eyes, processing. I want to see my son. Of course. The medical examiner has. And I want Neal's visitor logs, Santos's commissary records, and the duty roster for every guard who was on shift yesterday. Mr. Clifford, I can't just. You can. You will. Or I start calling news stations, the Justice Department, and every military connection I have. And Warden Hunt? I have a lot of connections. Silence. Then, check your email in 1 hour. 30 minutes. Mr. Clifford. 28 minutes now. The line went dead. Michelle was crying, silent tears streaming down her face. Luke pulled her close, and for the first time since the phone call, his own eyes burned. But he didn't let the tears fall. Not yet. Grief was a luxury he couldn't afford until this was finished. What are you going to do? Michelle whispered. Luke looked at the photo on Hunt's desk. The warden with his wife and teenage son, all smiling at some happy family occasion. He thought about Preston's smile, the way his son used to laugh at terrible jokes, the promise in his eyes during that last visit. Whatever I have to, Luke said. They went to see Preston's body. The medical examiner tried to prepare them, but nothing could prepare a parent for seeing their child's corpse. Preston looked smaller somehow, diminished, the vibrant young man reduced to pale flesh and brutal wounds. Luke studied the wounds with clinical precision, noting angles, depth, placement. This wasn't a fight. This was an execution. Neal had known exactly where to strike. In the parking lot, Luke checked his email on his phone. Hunt had sent the files with 7 minutes to spare. Luke scrolled through them, his jaw tightening with each page. 23 guards on duty. 18 of them had received sudden payments in the past 6 months. Deposits of $2,000 to $5,000 to various accounts. Payments that corresponded with incidents where security failed at opportune moments. Santos's visitor logs showed a pattern too. The same lawyer who'd appeared in Hunt's office, visiting every week. In phone calls, Santos made dozens of calls weekly to a number registered to a warehouse in Richmond. Luke forwarded everything to an encrypted cloud account, then deleted the email from his phone. He sat in the car, Michelle beside him, and began making notes. 23 corrupt guards, 1 cartel boss, and a system designed to protect them all. His phone rang. Unknown number again. Luke answered. Mr. Clifford, this is Wilson Hunt. The warden's voice was different now. Hollow. I shouldn't be calling you. They'd kill me if they knew. But I have a daughter. She's 16. And when I look at her, I think about what happened to Preston and He broke off, breathing hard. Santos ordered it. Neal was just the weapon. And the guards, they look away because Santos pays them, and because they're scared, and because this is how things work here. Why are you telling me this? Because someone needs to stop it. I can't. I've tried, and I'm too weak, too compromised. But you, Hunt laughed bitterly. I read your file while you were viewing your son's body. Silver Star, Bronze Star, 3 commendations for valor. 20 years training Special Forces. You're not weak, Mr. Clifford, and I think you're about to do something. Luke said nothing. I'm going to send you something else, Hunt continued. A list. Every guard who took Santos's money. Every address. Every vulnerability. Consider it. Consider it an apology for what I let happen to your son. And Santos. Protective custody, Block D, Cell 24. But he's untouchable. The moment you try anything official, his lawyers descend, evidence disappears, witnesses recant. The system protects him. Then I won't use the system. Silence. Then, I didn't hear that. And this call never happened. The line went dead. Luke's email pinged. A new message from an anonymous sender. He opened it. 23 names. 23 addresses. Personal details. Marriages, divorces, debts, addictions. Every weakness, every pressure point, every secret that could be exploited. Michelle was looking at him, her face pale in the fading light. "Luke, what are you thinking?" He showed her the list. "I'm thinking about what I taught thousands of soldiers. How to plan, how to execute, how to complete the mission." "And what's the mission?" Luke looked at his wife, this woman who'd stood beside him through 3 decades, who'd raised their children while he deployed, who'd never asked him to be anything other than what he was. "Justice," he said. "Real justice. Not the kind that comes from courts and lawyers and systems designed to protect men like Santos. The kind that can only come from someone who knows how to fight." Michelle was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. "Preston was our son, our baby, and they murdered him like he was nothing." "They did. Then do what you need to do." Her voice was steel. "But come home to me and Sarah when it's done." Luke kissed her forehead, started the car, and drove them home. But his mind was already elsewhere, already planning, already becoming the weapon his son's killers had forced him to become. 23 corrupt guards. One cartel boss. 72 hours before anyone noticed the pattern. The countdown had begun. Chapter 3, Gathering Shadows. Luke dropped Michelle home, promising to be back soon. Sarah hugged him at the door, her eyes red from crying, and he held her longer than usual, breathing in the scent of her shampoo, memorizing the feeling of his daughter in his arms. When this was over, things would be different. It would be different. "I love you, Dad," Sarah whispered. "I love you too, sweetheart. Always." He drove to a storage unit outside Richmond, one he'd rented years ago for equipment he couldn't keep at home. Military habits died hard. Inside, covered in dust, were the tools of his former life. Tactical gear, communication equipment, and weapons he'd acquired over the years through legal channels. All properly registered, all perfectly legal. But in the right hands, lethal. Luke's hands. He spent 2 hours organizing, checking equipment, creating a mobile operation center in the back of his truck. Then he sat in the darkness, surrounded by the instruments of his trade, and pulled up the list Hunt had sent. 23 names. He needed to understand them, find their connections, identify the weak links. In Special Forces training, he taught soldiers that intelligence won wars. Bullets just finished them. First on the list, Kirk Johns, senior correctional officer, 12 years at Riverbend. Divorced, behind on child support, drinking problem. 3 deposits of $3,500 in the past 4 months. Kirk had been on duty in Preston's block when the murder happened. Luke cross-referenced Kirk's address with satellite imagery, street view, property records. Single-story house in a working-class neighborhood. Minimal security, neighbor complaints about noise. Vulnerable. Second, Robbie McFarland, guard 5 years in. Married, 2 kids, wife recently diagnosed with cancer. Desperate for money, making him an easy target for Santos's corruption. Robbie had disabled the security cameras in the common area. Third, Cliff Johnson, guard supervisor. He was the coordinator, the one who made sure everyone was looking the other way at the right time. 3 DUIs, barely hanging onto his job. Santos owned him completely. Luke worked through the night, building profiles, identifying patterns. By dawn, he had a map, not just of addresses, but of connections, relationships, weaknesses. This wasn't just a list of corrupt guards. This was a network, carefully built and maintained. At 6 a.m., his phone rang. Unknown number. "Mr. Clifford? This is Frederick Anderson. I was Preston's cellmate." Luke sat up straight. "Go on. I heard what happened. Preston was my friend. Only real friend I had in here. And I want you to know it wasn't about money or gambling or any of that bullshit the Warden's feeding people." Frederick's voice cracked. "Santos wanted Preston gone because your son was talking to a reporter." "What reporter?" "Violet Ferguson. She's been investigating corruption at Riverbend for 6 months. Preston started talking to her 3 weeks ago, telling her everything about Santos's operation. How it works, who's involved, everything. Santos found out. That's why Preston died." Luke's mind raced. "Where's this reporter now?" "I don't know, but Preston kept notes, names, dates. He hid them in our cell, behind a loose brick in the wall. 3rd row from the ceiling, 5th brick from the left. I couldn't get them myself, but maybe you can do something with them. Why are you telling me this?" Because Preston talked about you. Said you were the toughest man he knew. Said if he could be half the man you were, he'd die happy. Frederick laughed bitterly. Guess he didn't get the chance. So I'm telling you because someone should know the truth. And because Santos bragged about it. Told everyone Preston died screaming for his daddy. Something in Luke's chest turned to ice. Thank you, Frederick. Mr. Clifford? When this is over, when you're done, I hope Santos suffers. I hope he suffers like Preston did. He will. Luke ended the call and immediately searched for Violet Ferguson. She wasn't hard to find. A freelance investigative journalist, multiple awards, reputation for taking on dangerous stories. Her most recent article was about prison corruption in Virginia, published 2 months ago. Nothing since then. He found her number and called. This is Violet. Miss Ferguson, my name is Luke Clifford. Preston Clifford was my son. Silence. Then, Mr. Clifford, I'm so sorry. I heard what happened. Were you investigating Riverbend? Did Preston talk to you? I can't discuss my sources. My son is dead because he talked to you. I'm not asking you to betray his confidence. I'm asking you to help me finish what he started. Another pause. Mr. Clifford, what exactly are you planning to do? The right thing. That's not an answer. It's the only one you'll get. Will you help me? Violet was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was different, harder, more focused. Meet me at Baker's Diner on Route 60 in 2 hours. Come alone. Luke arrived early, scanning the diner for exits, cameras, potential threats. Old habits. Violet arrived exactly on time, a woman in her mid-30s with sharp eyes and a laptop bag that looked like it had been through a war. She sat across from him in a back booth. Preston was brave. Scared but brave. He knew what he was risking. Tell me everything. Violet pulled out a folder. Carlos Byers, a.k.a. Santos, has been running Riverbend like his personal kingdom for 5 years. He controls the drug trade, protection rackets, and has at least 18 guards on his payroll. The warden knows and does nothing because Santos's cartel has threatened his family. But it's bigger than that. She spread photos across the table. Santos meeting with well-dressed men outside the prison, meeting with lawyers, meeting with what looked like politicians. Santos isn't just a cartel boss, Violet continued. He's a connection point. His operation launders money for criminal enterprises across 3 states. The warehouse in Richmond? That's where they process everything. And the guards aren't just corrupt, they're complicit. They're part of the organization. Luke studied the photos. You have evidence? I have enough to start an investigation. But here's the problem. Santos's lawyer is Omar Key, one of the best criminal defense attorneys on the East Coast. The moment I publish, Key will bury my sources, tie everything up in litigation, and Santos will walk. Preston understood that. He was helping me build an airtight case. What did he tell you? Everything. Names, dates, specific incidents. Where the drugs come in, how the money moves, which guard are involved. He was keeping notes, documenting everything. Violet leaned forward. Mr. Clifford, if we can get those notes, combine them with what I have, we can bring down the entire network. Not just Santos, everyone. And how long would that take? 6 months. Maybe a year. Grand juries, federal investigations, trials. Too long. Violet looked at him carefully. Mr. Clifford, I know you're angry. I'm not angry. I'm operational. She blinked. What does that mean? Luke gathered up the photos. It means I spent 20 years teaching soldiers how to complete impossible missions. It means I know how to gather intelligence, plan operations, and execute objectives. And it means Santos and his people are going to face consequences much faster than 6 months. Are you talking about? Violet stopped, looked around the diner, lowered her voice. Are you talking about taking the law into your own hands? I'm talking about justice. Real justice. The kind that ensures men like Santos don't kill anyone else's son. Violet was quiet for a long moment. If you do what I think you're planning to do, you'll go to prison. Maybe. But Santos will be dead, his network will be broken, and those guards will face consequences. Isn't that worth it? Not if you destroy your life in the process. Luke thought about Michelle and Sarah, about the life he'd built over decades. Then he thought about Preston's body in the morgue, the 4 stab wounds, the way his son's eyes had been open, staring at nothing. My son is gone. Part of my life is already destroyed. I'm just deciding what to do with what's left. Violet studied him, and Luke saw her making a decision. Okay, I'll help you, but not with violence. I'll help you get Preston's notes. Help you understand Santos's operation. Maybe together we can find a way to take him down legally. I appreciate that, Miss Ferguson, but I think we both know the system failed my son. I'm not trusting it to deliver justice. She nodded slowly. Then at least let me document it. Whatever you're planning, whatever happens, let me tell the story. Let people understand why you did what you did. Luke extended his hand. Deal. They spent the next hour going over Violet's research. The more Luke learned, the angrier he became. Not the hot, explosive anger of the moment, but the cold, calculated fury of a man who understood exactly how much evil had been allowed to flourish. Santos's network was impressive in its efficiency. Drugs came in through corrupt guards during shift changes. Money moved through Santos's lawyer, Omar Key, who had connections to legitimate businesses that provided cover. The guard weren't just paid off, they were partners, sharing in the profits. And anyone who threatened the operation, like Preston, was eliminated. There's one more thing, Violet said reluctantly. Santos has someone on the outside, a lieutenant named Alberto Godfrey. He handles the enforcement, makes sure people stay in line, deals with problems. If you go after Santos, Godfrey will come after you. Good, Luke said. Let him try. He left the diner with Violet's research and a plan forming in his mind. First, he needed Preston's notes. That meant getting into Riverbend. Second, he needed to dismantle Santos's support structure, the guards, the money, the protection. Third, he needed to get to Santos himself. 23 corrupt guards, one cartel lieutenant, one lawyer who facilitated it all, and Santos at the center of the web. Luke drove to a military surplus store and made several purchases. Then he went to a bank, withdrew $10,000 in cash, and stopped at a hardware store. Anyone watching him might think he was preparing for a hunting trip. They'd be right, in a way. That evening, Luke sat in his garage, surrounded by maps, files, and equipment. Sarah brought him dinner, setting the plate down without a word. She looked at the materials spread across his workbench. Dad, whatever you're planning, please be careful. Luke looked at his daughter, this beautiful young woman who'd lost her brother. I promise I'll come back to you. That's not what I asked. It's the best I can do. Sarah kissed his forehead. Preston loved you. He'd want you to be safe. I know, but he'd also want Santos to pay for what he did. After Sarah left, Luke returned to his planning. He had 53 hours until the 72-hour window closed, and someone, Santos's organization, the cartel, law enforcement, began asking questions. 53 hours to dismantle an empire. Luke Clifford had executed missions in less time. He picked up his phone and called the first name on the list. Kurt Johns, the drunk guard with child support problems. Time to start applying pressure. Chapter 4, The First Moves. Kurt Johns left Riverbend at 11 p.m., stumbling slightly as he walked to his beat-up Ford in the employee parking lot. Luke watched from across the street. Engine off, lights dark. He'd been waiting for 3 hours, but patience was a skill he'd mastered decades ago. Kurt drove to Murphy's Bar, the same dive he visited every night after his shift. Luke followed at a distance, parking 2 blocks away. He watched Kirk enter, watched him order his first whiskey, then his second. At 1 a.m., Kirk stumbled out alone. Luke was waiting by his car. Kurt Johns. Kirk spun around, nearly falling. Who are you? Someone who wants to talk about Carlos buyers. The name cut through Kirk's drunken haze like a blade. His face went pale. I don't know what you're talking about. Luke held up his phone, showing a bank statement. 3 deposits. $3,500 each. Same day Santos had problems that needed solving, like security needing to be light when certain things happened. Kirk's hand moved toward his waistband. Guards carried off duty. Luke was faster, much faster, catching Kirk's wrist and twisting it behind his back, pressing him against the car. I'm not here to hurt you, Luke said quietly. Unless you make me. I'm here to offer you a choice. I can't, they'll kill me. They'll kill you anyway. Santos doesn't leave loose ends. You think you're special? You're just another bot guard who knows too much. Luke released him, but stayed close. But I'm offering you a way out. What do you want? Information. Then you're going to disappear. Kirk laughed bitterly. Where am I supposed to go? Luke handed him an envelope. Inside was $10,000 in cash and a bus ticket to Arizona. Your ex-wife has family there. Take the money, pay your child support, start over. Or stay here and wait for Santos to decide you're a liability. Kirk stared at the envelope, hands shaking. What information? Preston Clifford, the kid who got killed yesterday. Tell me exactly how it went down. Kirk's face crumpled. That kid, that was wrong. That was really wrong. Neil was supposed to just rough him up, scare him. But Santos changed the order last minute, made a kill order. And he broke off, breathing hard. We were told to stay back. What happened? 3 minutes before we responded. 3 minutes while that kid died. Who gave the order to you directly? Cliff Johnson. He's the supervisor. He coordinates everything for Santos. Without Johnson, the whole system falls apart. Luke filed that information away. Anyone else involved in Preston's death specifically? Robbie McFarland disabled the cameras. Brandon Law was supposed to be patrolling that wing, but took a break. And Kirk hesitated. Warden Hunt knew. He always knows. He just pretends he doesn't. Thank you for your honesty. Kirk looked at the envelope again. Why are you doing this? Who are you? I'm Preston Clifford's father. Kirk's face went ashen. Jesus. Listen, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. That kid didn't deserve. No, he didn't. Now get on that bus and don't come back. If I see you again, I'll assume you chose the wrong side. Kirk nodded, grabbed the envelope, and practically ran to his car. Luke watched him drive away, knowing Kirk would be on that bus by morning. Fear was a powerful motivator, and Luke had given him a bigger fear than Santos. The fear of a father's wrath. 1 guard down, 22 to go. Over the next 24 hours, Luke moved like a shadow through the guards' lives. He approached Robbie McFarland in a hospital parking lot where his wife was getting treatment. Robbie broke down crying, confessing everything, and Luke gave him the same deal, money and disappearance. Robbie took it. He found Brandon Law at a gas station, catching him alone at 3 a.m. Brandon was younger, cockier, until Luke showed him evidence of his involvement and explained what happened to people who killed his son. Brandon stopped being cocky and started talking. He provided details about Santos's daily routine, security protocols, and protective custody, guard rotations. 3 guards down. They were the easy ones, the outer ring of Santos's operation. The rest would be harder. Luke needed leverage, something that would crack the core of the operation. That meant Cliff Johnson, the supervisor who coordinated everything. But Johnson wasn't like the others. He was smart, paranoid, and deeply embedded in Santos's organization. Luke needed a different approach. He drove to Riverbend during visiting hours, disguised in simple civilian clothes, wearing glasses and a baseball cap. He'd grown a beard over the past 2 days, changing his appearance just enough to avoid recognition. At the visitor check-in, he signed in as Frederick Anderson's cousin, using a fake ID he'd created years ago for training purposes. Inside, the prison smelled like bleach and desperation. Luke moved through the visitors area, noting guard positions, camera angles, security protocols. Everything was being filed away for later. Frederick Anderson appeared behind the plexiglass, his eyes widening when he recognized Luke despite the disguise. Jesus, man, what are you doing here? Luke kept his voice low. Preston's notes. I need them. You can't just walk into his old cell and... I know. That's why you're going to get them for me. Frederick shook his head. I'm not in that cell anymore. They moved me to Gen Pop after Preston. After. Luke had anticipated this. Who's in Preston's old cell now? Some new kid. Joel Lindsay. Just got transferred from county. Doesn't know anybody. Scared out of his mind. Perfect. Here's what you're going to do. Luke explained his plan quickly, efficiently. Frederick listened, nodding, fear and determination warring on his face. If this works, Frederick said, you're going to take Santos down, right? All the way down. All the way down. Good. Because there are a lot of guys in here who are tired of his shit. A lot of families he's destroyed. Preston was just the latest. Frederick stood. I'll get you those notes. Check your email in 6 hours. Luke left the prison, drove to a secure location, and waited. He used the time to continue dismantling Santos's support structure, making calls, sending messages, applying pressure. By nightfall, 5 more guards had taken the deal and disappeared. The prison's staffing was starting to show gaps. Calls were going out, people were getting nervous. The clock was ticking. At 11 p.m., Luke's email pinged. Frederick had delivered. Attached were photos of Page's, Preston's notes, photographed by Joel Lindsay's contraband smartphone, sent through a complicated chain that ended at Violet Ferguson's secure server, then forwarded to Luke. Luke opened the files and read his son's words. Preston had documented everything. Names, dates, drug shipments, money transfers. He'd tracked Santos's operation with the meticulous attention of someone who understood the stakes. And at the end, dated 3 days before his death, Preston had written something that made Luke's throat tighten. If Santos finds out about these notes, I'm dead. But it's worth it. For every other kid in here who's trying to stay clean, trying to survive. For every family destroyed by his poison. And for Dad. I want him to be proud of me. I want to prove I can be brave like he was. Luke sat in his truck, surrounded by shadows, and let himself feel the grief for the first time since that phone call from the warden. His son, his brave, foolish, wonderful son who tried to do the right thing and paid for it with his life. He allowed himself 2 minutes. Then he locked the grief away and got back to work. Preston's notes provided the final pieces Luke needed. A schedule of when Santos received visits from his lawyer, Omar Key. Details about Alberto Godfrey's operations outside the prison. And most importantly, the location of Santos's real power, that warehouse in Richmond. Luke called Violet Ferguson. I have Preston's notes. They're everything you said and more. That's incredible. We can take this to the FBI. Not yet. First, we need to eliminate Santos's ability to retaliate. The warehouse. That's where his real operation is based. Take that down, and he's just another inmate. Mr. Clifford, you're talking about. I'm talking about finishing this. Will you help me? Violet was quiet for a long time. What do you need? Documentation. I'm going to the warehouse tonight. I need someone to record what happens, to bear witness. If this goes wrong, I need the story told. And if it goes right, then Santos loses his empire, and we move to phase 2. Violet met him 2 hours later, bringing cameras and recording equipment. Together, they drove to Richmond, to the warehouse district where Santos's operation ran 24/7, protected by corrupt police and paid-off inspectors. Luke parked 3 blocks away. Stay here. Keep the camera ready. If I'm not back in 2 hours, publish everything. Luke, Mr. Clifford, this is crazy. You're one man against. I'm a father against the people who killed his son. The numbers don't matter. Luke checked his gear one last time. Tactical vest, encrypted radio, 2 handguns, and something special he'd built in his garage. A portable EMP device, technically illegal but devastatingly effective. He approached the warehouse from the north, moving through shadows with the ease of decades of training. 2 guards at the front entrance, both armed. Security cameras on every corner. Luke noted it all, planned his approach. The EMP device activated with a soft whine that only he could hear. Every electronic system within 50 yards died. Lights, cameras, electronic locks. The warehouse plunged into darkness and chaos. Luke moved. The first guard never saw him coming. Luke used a taser, dropping him silently. The second guard was reaching for his radio when Luke appeared behind him, disabling him with precise efficiency. Inside, the warehouse was exactly what Preston's notes had described. A drug processing and distribution center, with at least 6 workers and 2 armed supervisors. Luke could hear them shouting, confused by the power outage, trying to figure out what happened. He didn't give them time to figure it out. Using thermal goggles, Luke moved through the darkness like a ghost, disabling workers one by one. Some fought back. He was gentle with them, recognizing they might just be desperate people working a bad job. But the supervisors, the men carrying military-grade weapons, the ones who'd chosen to work for Santos, Luke was less gentle. 15 minutes later, the warehouse was secure. Luke zip-tied everyone, called 911 from a burner phone reporting a drug operation, then set up cameras to document everything before the police arrived. He found Santos's records, shipping manifests, financial documents, communications, and copied everything to an encrypted drive. As he left, Luke looked back at the warehouse. This was Santos's real power, his ability to operate with impunity. As of tonight, that power was gone. He met Violet at the rendezvous point. It's done. The police will be there in minutes, and they'll find enough evidence to launch a dozen investigations. Violet looked at him with something like awe. You just took down a cartel operation by yourself. No, I just removed obstacles. Taking down Santos is going to be harder. Luke's phone rang. Unknown number. He answered, and a voice he didn't recognize said, "You've been busy, Mr. Clifford." "Who is this?" "Alberto Godfrey. Santos's friend. You just cost us a lot of money." "That warehouse was important." "Good. Tell Santos I'm coming for him next." "You think you can touch Santos?" "He's in protective custody. He's untouchable." "We'll see. But Alberto, you should run, because when I'm done with Santos, you're next on my list." I'm shaking. "Really?" Alberto laughed. "Tell you what, soldier boy, why don't we settle this face to face? Just you and me. Tonight. The old factory on Porter Street. Unless you're scared." Luke thought about it. Alberto was Santos's enforcer, his muscle. Taking him down would send a message and remove a major threat. But it was also obviously a trap. "Midnight," Luke said. "Come alone." "You too." Luke ended the call and looked at Violet. "Change of plans. I need you to document it." "I know. But Luke, this is a trap." "Of course it is. That's why it's going to work." Chapter 5. The Factory Meeting. The factory on Porter Street had been abandoned for a decade, a corpse of industrial America slowly being reclaimed by rust and vegetation. Luke arrived at 11:30 p.m., parking half a mile away and approaching on foot with night vision and tactical awareness. Alberto Godfrey thought he was setting a trap. He brought 6 men, all armed, all positioned around the factory like they were planning an ambush. Luke counted them from a distance, marked their positions, and smiled coldly. They'd trained for combat in controlled environments. Luke had trained soldiers to survive chaos. At 11:55, Luke texted Violet from his position. "If you don't hear from me by 1 a.m., send everything to the FBI and run." Her response was immediate. "Be careful." Luke approached the factory from an unexpected angle, coming from the east where Alberto's men hadn't thought to position anyone. Inside, the space was vast and dark, filled with debris and old machinery. Perfect for an ambush. Also perfect for someone who knew how to move in darkness. "Mr. Clifford," Alberto's voice echoed through the factory. "I'm impressed you actually came. Thought you might be smarter than that." Luke moved silently, circling, getting a visual on Alberto. The man was in his 30s, muscular, covered in tattoos. A career criminal who'd probably killed before and thought he was invincible. "Where are you, old man? Don't tell me you're scared." Luke had placed small speakers around the factory while Alberto and his men were setting up. Now he activated them, playing recordings of footsteps, voices, movement. Alberto's men started shooting at shadows, at each other's positions, creating chaos and confusion. In the chaos, Luke moved. The first man went down with a taser to the back. The second with a precise strike to the pressure point that dropped him instantly. Luke had spent 20 years teaching these techniques. Now he used them with brutal efficiency. Alberto realized too late what was happening. His trap had become Luke's hunting ground. "Who are you?" Alberto screamed into the darkness. Luke's voice came from the speakers, calm and measured. "I'm a father whose son you helped murder. And tonight, you're going to tell me everything about Santos's operation. Were you going to die here?" "Kill him." Alberto fired blindly, his shots hitting nothing but steel and concrete. Luke dropped 2 more men with gas grenades. Tear gas mixed with a disorienting agent he'd acquired through military channels. They went down gasping, unable to see or breathe. Only Alberto and 2 guards remained standing. They'd backed into a corner, weapons drawn, sweeping the darkness frantically. Luke's voice came again. "Last chance, Alberto. Tell me about Santos's protection, his connections, his weaknesses, or I leave you here for the police to find with enough evidence to put you away forever. I'm not telling you shit. Wrong answer. Luke activated the factory's old fire suppression system, which he'd rigged earlier. Water poured from ancient sprinklers, flooding the floor, creating new chaos. In the confusion, Luke disabled the last two guards and finally stood face to face with Alberto. Alberto fired. Luke had already moved, the bullets sparking off machinery. Luke closed the distance, disarmed Alberto with a technique that broke 2 fingers and put the man on his knees. Preston Clifford, that was my son's name. He was 23 years old. He was trying to get clean, trying to do the right thing. And you people killed him. Alberto spat blood. Your son was a snitch. He got what he deserved. Luke hit him. Not with technique, not with precision, but with rage, controlled, focused, but rage nonetheless. Alberto went down hard. Tell me about Santos. Tell me how he communicates, who protects him, what his routine is. Tell me everything, or I swear to God, I'll make you wish you'd never been born. Alberto looked up at this man who'd single-handedly destroyed his ambush, who'd taken down 6 armed men without breaking a sweat, and fear finally cracked his bravado. Okay. Santos, he has a phone, smuggled in, talks to his lawyer every day at noon, calls to coordinate operations. The guards, they're loyal because he pays them, and because he'll kill their families if they betray him. His cell, it's protected. They moved him to maximum security, but even there he's got guards who make sure nothing happens to him. Who? Cliff Johnson, the supervisor. He's Santos's main contact inside. Without Johnson, Santos is vulnerable. The name Luke had heard before. The coordinator. The key. What about Omar Key? The lawyer? Key's the brains. He set up the whole operation, make sure the money's clean, the evidence disappears. He's got connections to judges, prosecutors, politicians. You can't touch him legally. I'm not planning to touch him legally. Luke zip-tied Alberto and his men, then called 911 from another burner phone. 7 men at the Porter Street factory, all armed, all involved in drug trafficking. Better hurry. He walked out, leaving them for the police, and drove to meet Violet at a safe location she'd arranged, a friend's cabin outside the city. It's all recorded, Violet said, showing him footage she'd captured with a long-range camera. You took down 7 armed men without killing any of them. I'm not a murderer. I'm a soldier. There's a difference. Luke sat heavily, adrenaline fading, exhaustion setting in. Alberto talked. Santos's real vulnerability is Cliff Johnson. Take him out of the equation, and Santos loses his protection inside the prison. So what's the plan? Luke pulled up files on his laptop. Cliff Johnson has been coordinating Santos's operation for 3 years. He's smart, careful, paranoid. But he has a weakness. What? His daughter, Paige Ames. She's 26, doesn't know about her father's activities, works as a teacher in Richmond. Johnson's terrified Santos will target her if he ever steps out of line. Violet frowned. You're not going to hurt her. Of course not. But I'm going to make sure Johnson knows she's in danger. From Santos. And then I'm going to offer him a way to protect her. By turning on Santos. By telling the truth. Luke spent the next 6 hours crafting a careful plan. He contacted Johnson through an anonymous email, sending evidence of Santos's operation and proof that Alberto had been captured. Then he added something new, documentation that Santos had ordered a hit on Johnson's daughter as insurance. The documentation was fake. Luke had created it using his knowledge of how Santos operated. But Johnson wouldn't know it was fake. He'd only know his daughter was in danger. The email ended with a simple message. You have 12 hours to decide whose side you're on. Save your daughter or save Santos. Choose. Luke also sent a copy to Paige Ames, warning her that her father was in danger and she needed to go somewhere safe. He included enough information to be credible without revealing everything. At dawn, Luke's phone rang. It was Cliff Johnson. You son of a bitch. You really think this is going to work? I think you love your daughter more than you fear Santos. I think you know Santos will kill her eventually anyway, because that's what men like him do. They don't leave loose ends. Luke kept his voice calm. I'm offering you a way out. Testify against Santos, Give me everything I need to make sure he never hurts anyone again, and I'll make sure your daughter is protected. Protected how? Santos has people everywhere. Santos had people everywhere. Past tense. His warehouse is gone. His lieutenant is in custody. Half his guards have disappeared. His empire is crumbling. Cliff, you're not protecting the winning side anymore. You're clinging to a sinking ship. Silence. Then, what do you want from me? Everything. Financial records, communication logs, testimony about Preston's murder. But most importantly, I want access to Santos. I want to look him in the eye. That's impossible. He's in maximum security. You're the supervisor. You coordinate shift changes, security protocols. You can make it possible. Another long silence. If I do this, they'll know it was me. Santos's people, the cartel, they'll come after me. They're already coming. At least this way, your daughter survives. And maybe, just maybe, you get to live with yourself. Johnson breathed heavily. Okay, I'll do it. But I want witness protection from me and Paige. I want guarantees. I'll arrange it through someone I trust. But the information first. They arranged a meeting for that afternoon. Luke brought Violet, recording everything as Johnson laid out Santos's entire operation in brutal detail. The murders, the corruption, the money, the drugs. Preston's death had been ordered personally by Santos, carried out by Tyrone Neal with Johnson's coordination and Kurt John's deliberate delay. Why Preston specifically? Luke asked, his voice carefully controlled. He was talking to a reporter. Santos doesn't tolerate that, and he wanted to send a message. Nobody is safe. Nobody can cross him. Johnson looked at Luke with something like shame. Your son was brave. Stupid, but brave. Most inmates just keep their heads down. Preston stood up, and you let him die for it. Yeah, I did. Johnson didn't make excuses. I let a lot of people die. I told myself it was necessary, that I was just trying to survive. But the truth is, I became part of something evil, and I let it destroy good people. Luke recorded everything, then arranged for Johnson and his daughter to be placed in temporary protective custody through a former military contact who worked federal security. It wasn't official witness protection, but it would keep them safe until the authorities could be brought in properly. With Johnson's testimony and Preston's notes, Luke now had everything he needed to destroy Santos legally. But legal destruction would take months, maybe years. And men like Santos had a way of escaping justice, of finding loopholes, of buying their way out. Luke wasn't willing to risk it. That evening, he reviewed his plan one more time with Violet. You have enough evidence to bring down Santos, his lawyer, and everyone involved, Violet said. Why not let the system handle it? Because the system failed my son. Because Santos will use his money and connections to delay, to intimidate witnesses, to walk free. Because I need to look him in the eye and make sure he understands why this is happening. And then what? Luke was quiet for a long moment. Then I make sure he can never hurt anyone again. Violet looked at him carefully. I've been documenting everything. Not to turn you in, but because people need to understand. Your son tried to fight corruption and was murdered for it. You tried to get justice, and the system failed you. What you're doing, it's not right. But I understand why you're doing it. Will you publish the story? After it's over. After Santos is dealt with. I'll tell Preston's story and yours, and let people decide what justice really means. Luke nodded. Thank you. He had 23 hours left in his 72-hour window. Tomorrow, he would enter Riverbend State Penitentiary one last time. Tomorrow, he would face Carlos Santos. And tomorrow, one way or another, this would end. Chapter 6. Into the Belly. Luke spent the night preparing with the methodical care of someone planning a military operation. He reviewed prison schematics Johnson had provided, memorized guard rotations, identified every camera, every checkpoint, every potential obstacle. He also prepared something else, a message. At dawn, he drove to Riverbend, but not as a visitor this time. Johnson had arranged something different. Luke would enter as a maintenance contractor, hired to inspect the maximum security wing's ventilation system. It was a weak cover, but it would get him inside, and that's all he needed. Michelle called as he sat in the parking lot. Luke, Sarah told me you haven't been home in 3 days. What's happening? I'm finishing something important. Is it dangerous? Yes. Silence. Then, are you coming home? I don't know. Luke. Her voice cracked. I lost Preston. I can't lose you too. I know. And I'm sorry. But the people who killed our son are still breathing, still hurting people. I can't let that stand. The people who killed our son are criminals, and there's a system to deal with them. The system doesn't work. Not for people like Santos. You know that as well as I do. Luke closed his eyes. Michelle, I'm not doing this out of revenge. I'm doing this because it's right. Because someone has to, and it has to be you. Who else knows how? Who else has the training, the skills, the will? Preston died because good people did nothing. I won't be one of those people. Michelle was crying now. Just come home when you're done. Promise me. I promise I'll try. He ended the call, feeling the weight of that promise. He might not be able to keep it, but he'd made it anyway because Michelle needed to hear it and because some part of him still hoped it was true. Luke entered Riverbend at 8 a.m., carrying a toolbox and wearing contractor coveralls Johnson had provided. The front desk guard barely looked at him. Johnson had made sure the right people were on duty, the ones who wouldn't ask questions. Inside, the prison felt different. Luke could sense the fear in the air, the whispers among guards, the tension in the inmates. Word had spread about the warehouse raid, about guards disappearing, about something happening to Santos's empire. The balance of power was shifting, and everyone could feel it. Johnson met him in a maintenance corridor, looking haggard and terrified. This is insane. If anyone finds out, they won't. Not until it's too late. Luke checked his watch. Santos is in cell 24, Block D. I have 15 minutes during shift change when the cameras will be off and the guards will be looking the other way. That's my window. 15 minutes to do what? To have a conversation. Johnson shook his head. He'll kill you. Santos, he's not like regular inmates. He's killed men with his bare hands, has connections to sicarios who'd murder their own mothers for him. You think you could just walk in there and... I think I can do what needs to be done. Now, take me to Block D. They moved through the prison, Luke noting every detail, every exit. If this went wrong, he needed to fight his way out, and while he was capable, the odds weren't great. But Luke had operated behind enemy lines before. Fear was just another variable to manage. Block D was maximum security, where the most dangerous inmates were kept. The air here was heavier, charged with violence barely restrained. Luke could feel eyes on him as they passed cells, inmates sensing something was about to happen. Johnson stopped at a security door. Beyond this point, you're on your own. I've done what I can. The guards won't interfere, the cameras will be off, but after 15 minutes, the system resets and everyone will know something happened. Understood. Mr. Clifford. Luke, what you're doing, it's going to have consequences. For you, for your family. Are you sure? Luke thought about Preston's face in the morgue, about the 4 stab wounds, about his son dying alone in a prison yard while guards watched. I've never been more sure of anything. Johnson unlocked the door. Luke stepped through. Cell 24 was at the end of the corridor, isolated from the others. A single guard sat outside, Brandon Law. One of the guards Luke had already turned. Brandon nodded once and walked away, leaving Luke alone with the cell door. Luke could hear movement inside. Santos knew someone was there. Who's that? It's not time for... Santos's voice cut off when he saw Luke through the small window. Recognition flashed across his face. You're the father. Luke unlocked the cell door. Johnson had provided the key and stepped inside. Carlos Santos. Byers was smaller than Luke expected, mid-40s, with scarred hands and dead eyes that had seen too much violence. He stood in the center of the cell, coiled and ready. Despite the fact that Luke was clearly not a threat, he could physically intimidate. Preston Clifford's father. Come to visit me? That's touching. Santos smiled, cold and cruel. Your boy died crying, crying for his daddy. Luke had prepared for this, for the psychological warfare, for Santos trying to provoke him. He didn't react. I didn't come here to fight you, Carlos. Santos. Only my mother called me Carlos, and she's dead. No, you're Carlos Byers. Santos is just a mask you wear. And today, I'm tearing that mask off. Santos laughed. You think you scare me, old man? You think shutting down one warehouse and turning a few guards changes anything? I have people everywhere. Lawyers, connections, protection. You're just some grieving father playing soldier. I'll be out of here in a year, maybe less, and I'll still be running things. You're right about one thing. I am a grieving father. But I'm not playing soldier. I'm a soldier. 20 years training special forces, teaching young men how to survive impossible situations, how to defeat enemies with superior numbers and resources. And do you know what I taught them? Santos said nothing, but Luke saw uncertainty flicker in those dead eyes. I taught them that every enemy has a weakness. Every fortress has a vulnerability. And every operation depends on critical infrastructure. You know what your critical infrastructure was, Carlos? Fear. You built your empire on fear. Fear of violence. Fear of retaliation. Fear of what you do to people's families. And I still have that fear. You think shutting down one warehouse changes that? No, but this does. Luke pulled out his phone and showed Santos a video. It showed Alberto Godfrey in police custody being led into a federal building. Your lieutenant is cooperating with the FBI, giving them names, locations, operations. Your warehouse is gone. Your lawyer, Omar Key, is under investigation for money laundering and conspiracy. Santos's face remained impassive, but his hands clenched. And here's the best part, Luke continued. Your guards, the ones you paid, the ones you trusted, 17 of them have disappeared. The ones who remain, they're terrified, not of you anymore. Of me, of what I'll do to them if they continue to protect you. You can't kill all of them. I don't have to. I just had to show them there's something worse than you. And there is. It's a father with nothing left to lose and a very particular set of skills. Luke stepped closer. Your empire is broken, Carlos. Your protection is gone. And now you're just another inmate in a cell, surrounded by men who hate you, guarded by people who no longer fear you. Santos lunged. Luke had expected it. He sidestepped, using Santos's momentum against him, putting the man face first into the concrete wall. Santos went down hard, bleeding from his nose. Don't, Luke said quietly. I don't want to hurt you more than necessary. I want you to understand something. Santos wiped blood from his face. What? My son died because you ordered it. Died because he had the courage to stand up to evil, to try to do the right thing. And you killed him for it. Because you're a coward who destroys anyone who threatens your power. Your son was weak. No, you're weak. You hide behind money and fear and violence because without them, you're nothing. Preston faced his demons, overcame his addiction, tried to build something better. That's strength. Real strength. The kind you'll never understand. Luke pulled out a folder and dropped it on the cell's small table. That's everything. Financial records, testimony from your guards, documentation of every crime you've committed. I'm giving this to the FBI through channels you can't corrupt. And I'm also giving it to someone else. Who? The families of every person you've killed or destroyed. I'm making sure they know who you are, where you are, and that you're no longer protected. In here, Carlos, you're vulnerable. And there are a lot of people who want you dead. Fear. Finally, Luke saw real fear in Santos's eyes. You can't do that. The prison will protect me. The prison doesn't protect anyone. It just warehouses bodies. And your body? It's about to become very popular. Luke moved toward the door. Enjoy your time, Carlos. However much of it you have left. Wait. Santos scrambled up. What do you want? Money? I can get you money. Protection for your family? I can arrange that. Just don't do this. Luke paused at the door, looking back at this man who'd ordered his son's death. I don't want your money. I don't need your protection. I want you to feel what Preston felt in his last moments. Fear. Helplessness. The knowledge that no one is coming to save you. You're a monster. No, I'm a father. And you made a fatal mistake when you touched my son. Luke left the cell, locked it behind him, and walked away. Santos's screams followed him. Threats and pleas mixing together, but Luke didn't look back. He had 3 minutes to exit before the cameras came back online. He made it with 30 seconds to spare. Johnson was waiting outside Block D, pale and shaking. What did you do? I made him understand that his empire is over. That's it? You didn't. You're not going to kill him. I don't need to. I've made him a target. Every enemy he's made, every family he's destroyed, they all know now that he's vulnerable. Nature will take its course. Johnson looked sick. That's cold. No, that's justice. The kind that actually works. Luke handed Johnson a flash drive. Everything's on there. Give it to the FBI. Make sure they understand the scope of Santos's operation and how many people were involved. And make sure they protect you and your daughter. Luke walked out of Riverbend State Penitentiary for the last time. He'd gone in as a grieving father. He walked out as something else, a man who'd looked evil in the face and refused to blink. Outside, Violet was waiting in her car. Well, it's done. Santos knows his empire is gone. The rest will follow. What rest? The consequences. The reckoning. Luke got in the car. Take me to Omar Key's office. We have one more stop to make. Chapter 7. The Lawyer's Comeuppance. Omar Key's law office occupied the top floor of a glass tower in downtown Richmond, the kind of place that screamed money and power. Luke had expected nothing less. Men like Key built empires on the suffering of others, and they did it from comfortable leather chairs with expensive views. Luke entered the building lobby at 2 p.m., dressed in a suit that made him look like any other businessman. Violet waited outside with cameras, documenting everything. This visit wasn't about violence. It was about information and intimidation. I'm here to see Omar Key, Luke told the receptionist. No appointment, but tell him it's about Carlos Byers. The receptionist hesitated, then made a call. 2 minutes later, Luke was being escorted to the top floor by a nervous paralegal. Key's office was everything Luke expected. Floor-to-ceiling windows, art that probably cost more than a car, furniture that whispered success. Key himself sat behind a massive desk, mid-50s, silver-haired, with the smooth confidence of a man who'd spent decades manipulating the legal system. Mr. Clifford, I've been expecting you. Key gestured to a chair. Please sit. Can I offer you anything? Coffee? Water? Information? Key smiled. Direct. I appreciate that, but I'm afraid I don't know what you're talking about. Carlos Byers is a client, and attorney-client privilege prevents me from discussing how you helped him run a criminal enterprise from inside a state prison. Luke pulled out his phone, showing documents. Preston's notes detailed every conversation Santos had with you, every instruction, every payment you facilitated, every witness you helped intimidate. Key's smile didn't waver, but his eyes hardened. Those allegations are unfounded and potentially libelous. I suggest you be very careful about what you say next. Or what? You'll have me killed like you had my son killed. I had nothing to do with your son's unfortunate death. And if you're suggesting otherwise, I'll have no choice but to pursue legal action. Luke stood, walking to the window. Beautiful view. You can see the whole city from here. All these people, living their lives, believing in justice and the rule of law. They think lawyers like you protect the system. They don't realize you're the ones destroying it from within. Mr. Clifford, I understand you're grieving, but I'm not here to grieve. Luke turned back, and something in his expression made Key's confidence falter. I'm here to give you a choice. You can cooperate with federal investigators, provide testimony about Santos's operation, and hope that earns you a reduced sentence. Or you can refuse, and I'll make sure every criminal organization Santos ever crossed knows that you're cooperating anyway. That's a bluff. Is it? Alberto Godfrey is already talking. Cliff Johnson has provided detailed testimony. 17 guards have disappeared, probably already making deals. Your client's empire is collapsing, Mr. Key, and you're the next domino. Luke leaned on the desk. The difference is, I'm giving you a chance to fall gracefully. Key stood, anger finally breaking through his professional facade. You have no idea who you're threatening. I have connections to people who make Santos look like a street thug. You attack me, and you'll wish you'd never. The office door burst open. FBI agents, led by a woman Luke recognized from his military days, Diane Whalen, now a senior agent. Omar Key, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, racketeering, money laundering, and obstruction of justice. Diane read him his rights, while 2 agents handcuffed him. Key looked at Luke with pure hatred. This is your doing. No, this is your doing. You chose to help Santos. You chose to facilitate his crimes. You chose to be part of the system that killed my son. Luke stepped aside as agents led Key away. I just made sure you face consequences. After they left, Diane approached Luke. Good to see you again, Luke. Though I wish it was under better circumstances. Diane, I appreciate you moving so quickly. We've been building a case against Key for 6 months. Your evidence, the testimony from Johnson, the document from Santos's warehouse, it gave us everything we needed. She paused. I'm sorry about Preston. Thank you. We're going to need your statement. Everything you know, everything you did. Luke had prepared for this. I'll give you everything, but I need 24 hours to tie up loose ends. What kind of loose ends? The personal kind. Diane studied him carefully. Luke, you're walking a very thin line here. What you've done, taking down Santos's operation, turning his guards, gathering evidence. Technically, you've interfered with an ongoing investigation. I can overlook that because you got results we couldn't. But if you do anything illegal in the next 24 hours, I won't. I just need to make sure my family is safe, and I need to... He trailed off, not sure how to finish. You need closure, Diane said quietly. I get it. 24 hours. Then you come in and give us everything. Deal. Luke left Key's office, met Violet outside, and they drove in silence for a while. Finally, Violet spoke. It's really over, isn't it? Santos is finished. Key is arrested. The guards are gone. You did it. Not yet. There's still one loose end. What? Tyrone Neal, the man who actually killed Preston. Violet went pale. Luke, you can't. The FBI, they're involved now. If you do something to Neal, I'm not going to hurt him. I'm going to visit him. Neal was in the hospital wing of Riverbend, recovering from injuries he'd sustained when other inmates attacked him after Preston's death. Even in prison, there were lines you didn't cross, and killing a kid trying to get clean was one of them. Luke arranged the visit through connections Johnson had provided before disappearing into witness protection. At 9 p.m., he sat across from Tyrone Neal in a private room, a guard station outside who knew to give them privacy. Neal was 28, rail-thin, with the hollow eyes of someone who'd lived a hard life. His face was bruised, and he moved carefully, ribs probably broken. You're Preston's dad, Neal said flatly. I am. Come to kill me? No. I came to understand why. Neal laughed bitterly. Why? Money. Santos paid me $5,000 to kill your son. That's it. That's the reason. $5,000. Luke felt his hands clench, forced himself to relax. That's the transaction. I want to know why you took it. Because I'm a piece of shit who is going to be in here for another 15 years, and $5,000 buys a lot of protection, a lot of comfort. Because Santos said if I didn't do it, he'd have my sister killed. Neal looked up, meeting Luke's eyes. But mostly, because I'm weak. Your son was strong, trying to change, trying to do the right thing. And I'm just surviving. Preston was trying to survive too. I know. That's what makes it worse. Neal's voice cracked. I think about it every day. Every time I close my eyes, I see his face. He didn't fight back, you know? He just looked surprised. Like he couldn't believe someone would actually do it. And I just kept stabbing. Luke stood, walked to the window. What was the last thing he said? He said, why? That's it. Just why? And I didn't have an answer. I still don't. Luke turned back. You're going to testify against Santos. You're going to tell the FBI everything. Who ordered it? How it was arranged? Who else was involved? And you're going to spend the rest of your life living with what you did. That's it? That's my punishment? No. Your punishment is that you have to live. You have to wake up every day knowing you killed a man who was trying to be better than his circumstances. You have to carry that weight. Luke moved toward the door. Santos took your choice away when he threatened your sister. I understand that. But you still made the choice to put that blade in my son. And you'll answer for that to a higher authority than me. I'm sorry, Neal whispered. I know it doesn't help, but I'm so sorry. Luke paused at the door. You're right. It doesn't help. But I believe you mean it. And maybe that's something. He left Neal in that hospital room, left him to face whatever consequences awaited. Luke had found what he came for. Not forgiveness, but understanding. Neal wasn't the real enemy. He was just another victim of Santos's empire. Someone pushed to do terrible things through fear and desperation. That didn't excuse what he'd done, but explained it. An explanation was all Luke needed to move forward. Outside the prison, Violet was waiting. "Well, I'm done. It's all finished. What now? Now I go home to my family. I testify to the FBI, and I try to figure out how to live with what I've done. Do you regret any of it?" Luke thought about that question. He'd taken down a criminal empire, destroyed lives, operated outside the law in ways that might haunt him forever. But Santos was finished. The corrupt guards were gone. Preston's death would have meaning. "No," he said finally. "I don't regret it. I just wish none of it had been necessary." They drove back to Violet's cabin, where Luke collected his things. Tomorrow, he'd meet with the FBI. Tomorrow, he'd face the consequences of his actions. But tonight, he just wanted to go home. Chapter 8, The Reckoning. Luke arrived home at midnight to find all the lights on. Michelle and Sarah were waiting, and the moment he walked through the door, Sarah ran to him, holding him tight. "Dad, oh God, Dad, we thought." "I'm okay. I'm home." Michelle approached more slowly, her eyes red from crying. "Is it over?" "It's over. Santos is finished. His operation is destroyed. The people who killed Preston are facing justice. And you? What happens to you?" "I meet with the FBI tomorrow. I'll tell them everything. There might be consequences for what I did, interfering with an investigation, taking matters into my own hands. But Diane Whalen, the agent in charge, she understands why I did it. She'll advocate for me." Michelle pulled him close. "I don't care about the FBI. I just need you here." "We both do." They sat together in the living room, and Luke told them everything. The guards, the warehouse, the confrontations, Santos' collapse. Sarah listened with wide eyes, while Michelle held his hand so tight it hurt. "Preston would be proud," Sarah said quietly. "He always said you were the bravest man he knew. He was braver than me. He stood up when it mattered." The next morning, Luke met with Diane Whalen and 3 other FBI agents in a secure location. He spent 6 hours giving testimony, providing every document, every recording, every piece of evidence he'd gathered. They asked hard questions, challenged his methods, pushed him on the legality of his actions. "Mr. Clifford, you understand you technically committed multiple crimes," one agent said. "Breaking and entering, assault, interfering with a federal investigation. I understand, and I take full responsibility for my actions." Luke met their eyes without flinching. "But I also want you to understand something. The system failed my son. He tried to do the right thing, tried to expose corruption, and he was murdered for it while guards watched. So yes, I took matters into my own hands. And I'd do it again." Diane spoke up. "The evidence Luke provided is solid. Without his intervention, we might never have cracked Santos's operation. He would still be practicing law, those guards would still be on Santos's payroll, and the warehouse would still be operating. I recommend we treat him as a confidential informant who used unconventional methods." The other agents exchanged looks. Finally, the lead agent nodded. "We'll need you available for testimony when the trials begin. Santos, Key, the guards that didn't take deals, they'll all face justice. But Mr. Clifford, don't ever do anything like this again." "I won't need to. This was personal." Over the next week, the dominoes continued to fall. Santos was transferred to a federal supermax prison, where he'd spend the rest of his life in isolation. Omar Key was denied bail, facing dozens of charges. 17 guards pleaded guilty to corruption charges. And Tyrone Neal gave detailed testimony about how Preston's murder was orchestrated. Violet Ferguson published her story, not just about the corruption at Riverbend, but about Preston's courage, about a father's quest for justice, about the failure of systems designed to protect people. It won awards, sparked investigations into prison corruption nationwide, and became a focal point for reform efforts. But Luke wasn't thinking about any of that as he stood at Preston's grave on a cold October morning. Michelle and Sarah stood beside him, the 3 of them united in grief, but also in something else, resolution. "I did what I could," Luke said quietly. "I made sure the people who hurt you face consequences. I try to make your death mean something." Sarah placed flowers on the grave. "He knows, Dad. Wherever he is, he knows." Michelle spoke, her voice stronger than Luke had heard in weeks. Preston made mistakes. He struggled. But in the end, he tried to do the right thing. That's what we have to remember. Not how he died, but how he lived in those final months, trying to be better. Luke nodded, unable to speak. The weight he'd been carrying for weeks finally lifted slightly, not gone, but manageable. He'd never forgive himself for the years he'd been distant, for the conversations he'd never had, for waiting too long to tell Preston he was proud of him. But he'd done everything he could to honor his son's memory. That would have to be enough. Chapter 9, New Beginnings. 3 months later, Luke stood in front of a congressional hearing on prison reform. Violet's article had sparked national attention, and now lawmakers wanted to understand how corruption had flourished so extensively. Mr. Clifford, you took extraordinary and, frankly, illegal actions to expose this corruption, Senator Rebecca Combs said. While we appreciate the results, don't you think you should have trusted the system? With respect, Senator, the system failed my son. He reported corruption through proper channels, and he was murdered for it. So no, I didn't trust the system. I trusted myself and my ability to act when others wouldn't. That's vigilantism. No, that's a father protecting other people's sons and daughters. Because if I hadn't acted, Santos would still be running his operation. More inmates would be victimized. More families would be destroyed. Sometimes the right thing to do isn't the legal thing. The hearing room was silent. Then Senator Combs leaned forward. What would you recommend we do to prevent situations like Riverbend? Luke had prepared for this question. He spent the next hour outlining specific reforms: independent oversight of prisons, protection for whistleblowers, better screening of correctional officers, and most importantly, addressing the conditions that allowed men like Santos to build empires. Fear is a powerful tool, Luke concluded. Santos used it to control inmates and guards alike. We need to create systems where people aren't afraid to do the right thing, where reporting corruption doesn't result in death sentences. That's how we prevent another Preston Clifford. The reforms would take years to implement. Some would fail, others would succeed. But at least the conversation had started. At least people were paying attention. Luke returned to Fort Bragg, but something had changed. He couldn't just go back to training soldiers, to living his life as if nothing had happened. He'd seen too much, done too much. He needed something more. He retired from the military with full honors and started a foundation in Preston's name, an organization that supported prison reform, provided legal assistance to inmates trying to expose corruption, and helped families navigate the system when loved ones were incarcerated. Michelle and Sarah worked with him, channeling their grief into purpose. They spoke at events, raised money, pushed for change. Preston's death had broken them, but it had also made them stronger, more determined. 1 year after Preston's murder, Luke received a letter from Frederick Anderson, Preston's former cellmate. He'd been released on parole, gotten a job, was rebuilding his life. Your son saved me, Frederick wrote, not just by talking to that reporter, but by showing me what courage looked like. He could have kept his head down, done his time, walked away. Instead, he stood up. Because of him, because of what you did to follow through, a lot of us got a second chance. I just wanted you to know that Preston's death meant something. It changed things. Luke read the letter to Michelle and Sarah. They cried together, but they also smiled. Because Frederick was right. Preston's death had meant something. It had exposed evil, broken a criminal empire, and started conversations that might prevent other tragedies. But more than that, it had reminded Luke of something he'd forgotten during his years of military service. That strength wasn't just about combat training or tactical excellence. Real strength was standing up when it was easier to stay silent. Real courage was fighting for what's right, even when the cost was everything. Preston had possessed that kind of courage. And in the end, so had Luke. On the second anniversary of Preston's death, Luke stood at his son's grave again. But this time, he wasn't alone. Dozens of people gathered. Former inmates Preston had befriended, family members of victims Santos had hurt, journalists who'd followed Violet's story, and even a few of the guards who'd taken Luke's deal and started over in new lives. Preston Clifford was 23 when he died, Luke said to the assembled crowd. He'd made mistakes, struggled with addiction, spent time in prison. But in his final months, he chose to be brave. He chose to fight corruption even though he knew the risks. And his courage, his choice to stand up, led to real change. He gestured to the people around them. Every person here represents a life touched by Preston's courage. Some of you knew him. Others know only his story. But all of us carry forward his legacy. The belief that one person can make a difference, that standing up to evil matters, that courage isn't about being fearless. It's about acting despite your fear. Violet Ferguson stepped forward, recording the ceremony for a documentary she was making. Preston's story is about more than his death, she said. It's about how his life, his choice to do the right thing, created ripples that are still spreading. Carlos Santos is in prison for life. Omar Key is facing decades behind bars. 17 corrupt guards lost their jobs and face justice. And across the country, prisons are implementing reforms inspired by this case. One young man's courage changed everything. As the ceremony ended and people dispersed, Luke stood alone at the grave for a moment. He placed his hand on the headstone, feeling the cold marble beneath his palm. I miss you, son, every day, but I'm proud of you. Prouder than I ever told you when you were alive. You were braver than any soldier I ever trained. And I promise I'll spend the rest of my life making sure people know that. Michelle joined him, slipping her hand into his. He knows. I hope so. They walked back to their car together, leaving flowers and memories behind. Luke had lost his son, but he'd found something too. A purpose, a mission that extended beyond his own grief. He'd taken his pain and anger and channeled it into something constructive, something that honored Preston's memory by preventing other tragedies. The legal system was slow, imperfect, often corrupt. But it was also capable of change when people like Preston stood up, when fathers like Luke refused to accept injustice, when journalists like Violet told stories that demanded attention. 6 months later, Luke received notice that Congress had passed the Preston Clifford Prison Reform Act, implementing many of the changes he'd recommended. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough to bring back his son. But it meant Preston's death had created lasting change, had made the world slightly better. On what would have been Preston's 25th birthday, Luke and Michelle released a scholarship in his name, funding for young people struggling with addiction who wanted to continue their education. Sarah helped design the program, incorporating what she'd learned in nursing school about addiction treatment and support. The first recipient was a young man named Paul Hall, who'd been clean for 6 months after years of struggling. He stood in their living room, scholarship check in hand, tears in his eyes. I didn't know Preston, Paul said, but his story, what he did, what you all did, it gave me hope. It showed me that you can come back from your worst mistakes, that courage matters, that standing up is worth it even when it's hard. Luke shook Paul's hand. Preston would have liked you. Make him proud. I will. I promise. As Paul left, Sarah hugged her father. You did it, Dad. You turned something horrible into something good. We all did. You, your mother, Violet, everyone who refused to let Preston's death be meaningless. Do you think he'd be proud of what you did? The way you took down Santos? Luke considered the question carefully. I think Preston would understand that sometimes the right choice isn't the easy one. Sometimes you have to step outside the rules to create real justice. Would he approve of everything I did? Maybe not, but he'd understand why I did it. And you? Do you have regrets? Only one. That I waited until Preston was going to tell him how much I loved him, how proud I was. Everything else, all the risks I took, the lines I crossed, I'd do it again in a heartbeat. 5 years after Preston's death, Luke stood on a stage at a prison reform conference, sharing his story with hundreds of advocates, lawmakers, and families affected by prison violence. His hair was completely white now, and lines creased his face, but his eyes remained sharp, focused. Preston Clifford was my son, he began. He was also a victim of systemic corruption, a casualty of our broken prison system, and a hero who chose courage over comfort. His death could have been just another tragic statistic. Instead, it became a catalyst for change. He showed pictures, Preston as a boy, as a teenager, in prison. Then images of the reforms implemented since his death, the lives saved, the corruption exposed. I'm not here to glorify what I did, Luke continued. I broke laws, took risks, operated outside the system. But I'm also not here to apologize. Because sometimes, when systems fail, when evil flourishes, when good people do nothing, someone has to step up. Someone has to be willing to fight. The audience was silent, hanging on his words. I was a soldier for 20 years. I taught combat, tactics, survival. But my son taught me the most important lesson of my life. That real courage isn't about fighting. It's about standing up, even when you know the cost might be everything. Preston did that. And in the end, so did I. My son is gone. Nothing I did brought him back. But because of his courage, and because of the actions that followed, hundreds of families have been spared similar tragedies. That's not enough. It will never be enough. But it's something. And sometimes, something is all we can achieve. Luke finished his speech to thunderous applause. But he wasn't thinking about the crowd. He was thinking about Preston, about that last conversation through plexiglass, about all the words left unsaid. That night, Luke sat in his study, looking at a photo of Preston, smiling, alive, full of potential. Michelle came in, placed a hand on his shoulder. "Are you okay?" "I'm getting there. Some days are harder than others. Do you think you'll ever stop blaming yourself?" Luke was quiet for a long moment. "No, but I've learned to carry it better. To use it as fuel for good things instead of just letting it consume me." Michelle kissed his forehead. "Preston loved you. He knew you loved him. That's what matters." "I hope so." 10 years after Preston's death, Luke received a letter from Carlos Santos. It came from a supermax prison where Santos would die, written in careful handwriting. "You destroyed my life," it read. "Everything I built, everyone I controlled. You took it all away. I hope you're satisfied." Luke stared at the letter for a long time. Then he wrote a single response. "I'm not satisfied. I'm just doing what needed to be done. You killed my son. You hurt countless others. And now you're facing consequences. That's not satisfaction. That's justice." He never sent the letter. Santos didn't deserve a response. Instead, Luke filed it away and went back to his work with the foundation, to helping families navigate impossible situations, to ensuring Preston's legacy continued to spread. On the 20th anniversary of Preston's death, a day Luke hoped he'd never see, he stood at the grave one final time with Michelle and Sarah. Luke was 72 now, no longer the soldier who'd taken down an empire, but he still carried the same determination, the same sense of purpose. 20 years, Michelle said softly. "It feels like yesterday and a lifetime ago." "I know." Sarah had brought her own children, Luke and Michelle's grandchildren who'd never known their uncle. "Grandpa, tell us about Uncle Preston." Luke smiled, looking at these young faces, and began to tell the story. Not about the corruption or the violence or the revenge, but about a young man who'd struggled and fought and ultimately chose courage. About a son who'd taught his father what real strength meant. "Your uncle made mistakes," Luke said. "We all do. But when it mattered most, he stood up. He did the right thing, even though he knew it might cost him everything. And because of that, he changed the world." As they left the cemetery, Luke looked back one last time at Preston's grave. The stone was weathered now, covered in offerings from people who'd never met his son, but knew his story. Flowers, letters, tokens of gratitude from lives changed by Preston's courage. Luke had spent 20 years trying to make his son's death mean something. Building a foundation, pushing for reform, helping others navigate the system that had failed Preston. And in doing so, he'd found something he'd lost when Preston died. Purpose, meaning hope. Santos was dead now, killed in prison by inmates who'd never forgotten what he'd done, who'd seen an opportunity when his protection vanished. Omar Key was still in prison, his law license revoked, his empire in ruins. The corrupt guards had scattered, facing various consequences for their choices. But more importantly, the system had changed. Not completely, not perfectly, but measurably. Oversight had improved. Whistleblower protections had strengthened. Inmates had new avenues to report corruption. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough, but it was something. And Preston's name lived on. Not just in Luke's foundation, but in the reforms bearing his name, in the scholarship recipients, in the lives saved by the changes his death had catalyzed. Luke Clifford had been many things in his life. A soldier, an instructor, a father, a warrior. But in the end, he was simply a man who'd refused to let evil go unchallenged, who'd fought for justice when the system failed, who'd honored his son's memory by ensuring his courage meant something. As they drove home, Luke felt Michelle take his hand. "You did good, Luke. Preston would be proud." "I hope so. God, I hope so." Behind them, the sun set over Preston's grave, casting long shadows across the cemetery. But Luke wasn't looking back anymore. He was looking forward to the work still undone, to the lives still needing help, to the legacy still being built. Preston Clifford had died at 23, murdered in a prison yard. But his courage had sparked a revolution, had inspired his father to become something more than a soldier, had changed countless lives. And that, Luke thought, was the best revenge of all. Not destroying his enemies, but building something so meaningful, so lasting, so good that it eclipsed the evil that had taken his son. 20 years of work, 20 years of fighting, 20 years of honoring a promise to a boy who just wanted to make his father proud. Luke had kept that promise, and he'd keep it for the rest of his life. Because that's what fathers do. They protect, they fight, they endure, and they never, ever forget.
This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your precious time. If you enjoyed this story, then please make sure you subscribe to this channel. That would help me a lot. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.